Good morning. This is Jason Dean at Film Fanatic. It is Saturday around 8:43, so I hope everyone's doing good. If you get a chance, please like and subscribe to my channel. It's always greatly appreciated. I love that people have been checking out the page more and more, and it's been growing. With people following the page and also subscribing and also liking and commenting more too. Feel free to comment if you feel so inclined to, because it's a great way to for me to kind of engage with the audience that is part of this whole thing. And again, it's always about this whole thing's all about my love of these movies that I try to bring to you every day or every week, and it's about trying to shed some light, hopefully on maybe a few movies that I consider to be just really great, and maybe bring some light onto some films that haven't been talked about, or they might be on the obscure side of things. Most of the movies that I cover are what could be considered to be like on the obscure side, underground films and such. But I also, try to always mix things up. Predominantly, most the overall scope of this channel is, and for my Instagram page, main at Film Fanatic, and also my Facebook page, Film Fanatic, and now the YouTube channel, which I just changed the name to Film Fanatic last week. It was under just Jason Dean, and then underneath that was the Film Fanatic thing. All the videos were labeled that, but I decided to change the name to the whole page as Film Fanatic, so it's a little bit more, maybe a little bit easier to find, and just a little bit more direct. So yeah, what I try to do is just always, bring some new movies to the table that I've been watching. I see tons of movies all the time, and try to bring some light, shed some light on some films that are pretty obscure. And the overall scope of the channel is I mostly concentrate on horror, science fiction. The majority of the videos are probably focused on a lot of the grindhouse movies that I really love. Overall, out of all of the genres of films that are out there and that I love, everything from foreign films to action movies, comic book movies, which is kind of almost its own subgenre, um, suspense films, um, films that are quote unquote a little bit more on the commercial side, Hollywood blockbusters, and then there's the horror genre, which is my biggest. That's where my passion really lies. And even when you say the horror genre, that's a really broad term, because I'm not a big fan of people using labels and things all the time. And for me, it's like if I like if I like something and it just like resonates with me somehow, or in some way, I don't really think about, well, this is part of this genre, or this is that, this or that label. um it's either it's good or bad to me, or it resonates with me. you know but that being said, I also have, overall my favorite style that I always kind of gravitate towards. And overall, like, I've been watching films for a long, long time, and especially the last few years I've been diving into it even more heavily, like the last 10 years or so. My favorite style overall is the more the grindhouse horror genre. That's kind of it's kind of my obsession. But that being said, I love all kinds of movies, so I try to mix things up. Like I did a show yesterday on Clint Eastwood's The Unforgiven, which is, I haven't really done any uh, Western films on this channel, and I love the classic Western, John Ford, and going back to his work. Huge fan of Sergio Leone. all the spaghetti westerns. And I love some of the films that Clint Eastwood has directed. Not only as an actor, but probably, I think was he's actually been directing films for just an incredibly long time. I think the first film he had directed was Play Misty for Me, which was like from like the late '70s. So he's been directing movies since then, and he still does, which is wild. But I've always loved him as an actor. You know, he's always been kind of an icon, and he is an icon, particularly in his when he's in the real you know those epic westerns. And as far as an actor, were like my favorite period of Clint Eastwood's work is probably when he worked with Sergio Leone in the '60s and '70s for all the spaghetti westerns, and then eventually moved into directing films. And he's really he's got some incredible movies under his belt. So I did a show on overall probably my favorite film that he's directed, The Unforgiven, and overall it's probably my favorite western of all time. So I did a show on The Unforgiven. So I try to mix things up. I did a show, a series. My last kind of coverage of a franchise was the Marvel movies, the Avenger movies. I'm a huge fan of those films, as well as a lot of Marvel movies. So I did a big thing on that. So try to mix things up, along with a lot of the Grindhouse movies that I've been covering. So yeah, so stay tuned for various one other genre I'd like to get more into, which I really love, and I haven't done any coverage of those films or these films, documentaries. I'm a huge fan of documentaries, and a few years back, I used to. I have a pretty good collection of those. I remember about 10 years ago or so, I kind of got bit by this bug by the documentary bug, and I started really watching tons of documentaries. I used to go. There's a real famous, now it's like an international festival, but I used to go to the Camden Film Festival pretty regularly, and that's a major festival now. It's up there, I think, almost with some of the massive film festivals out there like Sundance and whatnot. They It started from nothing. It grew totally into this massive grassroots thing, and now it's like a regular part of the film industry, and it's a major player. One of my favorite documentary and director, or favorite director of documentaries, is Alex Gibney, and he's done all kinds of amazing films. Taxi to the Dark Side, The Smartest Guys in the Room, that really amazing movie about Enron. Just an incredible, probably my favorite director in that genre. And he's won Academy Awards and all these kinds of things. And he's had a lot of his premieres of a lot of his films at Camden Film Festival, and so it's really moved into a real, it's a real highly regarded festival now. But their whole thing is they only show shorts, but the main focus of it is all documentaries. So probably about 10 years ago when I started going to that festival, I haven't been to it in a few years, but I used to go to it. It's always every year around like kind of around my birthday in the beginning of the fall, and I would go to it every year, and it was always something to look forward to. But their whole thing is they show documentaries, and about 10 years ago, I really got into documentaries. There were so many great documentaries coming out for a period, and there still is. And I used to go to, which unfortunately it's closed, but there was a video store in Camden, Maine, Harborough Video, and for a while I had two memberships to do two different video shops or stores. I had and I still do. I have I have membership to Opera House Video, which I've done a lot of work with. I used to do, and they're right in Belfast. I used to do all kinds of work with them. Good friends with Dennis Howard, the owner. I used to do these reviews for Film Fanatic or through Film Fanatic for their movies, and I used to write reviews for that shop, and that was a really great experience. I did that for probably for about 2 years or so. So, and it was in print form and then also in a digital format. And I did a bunch of videos also around it. So those videos I mostly had uploaded through like Instagram and Facebook. But it was a cool thing. I never had any experience writing before, like actually writing published reviews. So I did that for a while, and that was a really cool experience. I learned a lot doing that. Um, but so I've had my membership to Opera House Video for a long time, but I also at one point I had a membership to Harbor Auto Video, which was also a video store in Camden, a rental place basically for DVDs and Blu-rays. And that place was pretty awesome. They had an amazing selection of foreign films and documentaries. That was probably like overall they have pretty good selection, but their specialty or the genres that they seem to have a really great assortment of was definitely in the documentary and foreign film uh, category. So I used to go there all the time and rent movies, and I still am down in that area a lot. But during that period, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I was down in uh, Thomaston, Maine, and also South Thomaston, Rockland. But I was down in that area a lot. I was playing with a few bands at the time, and we had like monthly gigs down there, and then I was also doing some recording projects. So I was down there at one point every weekend, like usually on Fridays and Saturdays, and during the day on Sundays, and I got in this kind of ritual thing of where after I was done doing my work or whatever, I would come, always drive through Camden, so I would stop at Harbor Auto Video and always rent movies there, and it was great because I also at the time worked at the teen center in Camden, so I was I could bring the movies right back, and it was in Camden, so it was really convenient. And my girlfriend at the time lived in Camden, so we used to go there all the time to rent movies. And then after a few years, they had announced that they were closing just because they couldn't keep up. I mean, sales wise and business wise, it was too hard. And that was right around the time when the whole Netflix and all of the streaming platforms started to emerge, especially Netflix. So that's there was a big shift as far as the general public's habits of watching movies. So unfortunately, they took a massive hit, and they couldn't stay open anymore. So it was pretty sad. Miraculously, Opera House Video is still going strong somehow, and you know, so it's you know, sometimes I think, wow, how do they do it? In this age, but they do, and they have a really good. The business itself has been around for probably 20 years, maybe more. It had about three different owners, but they, over because they've been a business for so long, they have this. I think they have a real good local and loyal fan base that's able to support that and support what they do, considering the whole playing field or the whole dynamic of how people view and watch movies or even buy movies is completely different. It's wild to see how much it's changed. I was talking about when I first started going up to Harbor Auto Video, I had both memberships going, uh, and that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And to see where things have changed so much just within those few years is pretty unbelievable. But during that time, Harbor Auto Video, they couldn't survive, so they ended up closing. But they had this big sale, and they're basically everything that they had in the shop they were selling. So I went there and I bought tons of movies. I bought, I don't know, I probably bought like 100 Blu-rays and 100 DVDs. Like, it was just crazy. And I got there. I remember it was like the whole week. Uh, they were, they had announced basically that they're going to be closing, and for like the last 2 weeks, they had this massive sale, and like everything that was in there was going. And I got there pretty early, and I got some really great movies. But I bought a lot of documentaries. I bought a lot of, you know, foreign films, because that was kind of where they're they had a really great collection. It was probably their best, where they had the most content. So I went through this whole period where I was watching tons of documentaries also, and I really love documentaries, and I haven't done any for this channel, so I'm very much looking forward to doing some at some point, along with other movies. But so stay tuned for that. So again, it's a thing of trying to mix up things, trying to have you know bring some variety along with a lot of the stuff that I traditionally do for these pages and this, and especially for this channel. Variety's the spice of life, and I'm like that with music. I have that same kind of thing of where I try to or I try to check out a lot of new music all the time. I love all different styles of music, reggae music, world music. Obviously, I grew up playing rock and roll, so I'm kind of and then also metal, death metal, black metal. That's kind of that's kind of in my DNA. And it's funny because the last few years, I started to. I never stopped listening to it, but I definitely. There were periods where I didn't listen to it for a long time, just because I was checking out lots of other things. My tastes were kind of evolving or changing or getting. I don't know, getting. They were expanding. They were a little bit more broad than they were, and but there was a time when I didn't really listen to as much black metal. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I got back into listening to a lot of black metal, so I like been listening to that a lot more. I've been listening to a lot more extreme death metal stuff, a lot of Cannibal Corpse. But I love, you know, probably the music that's my favorite is I love jazz based music, and then also electronic music. And overall, I try to check out a lot of different genres. I have, I love lots of many different things, but overall, like my favorite style of music, and it's a style that I can probably, I can kind of listen to in any given day, on any given day. Sometimes you have to be in a certain mood to like want to listen to something. But with electronic music, I can kind of listen to it anytime. So electronic music is overall my favorite style of music, and so I constantly listen to that kind of music, even though I love all kinds of music. So it's kind of the same thing with my movie taste. I have try to have a pretty open mind and have pretty wide range of different eclectic. Try to have eclectic taste. Um, but overall, at the end of the day, my favorite style is the grindhouse horror exploitation thing. That's like my jam. So this brings me to this movie. I saw this movie a few years ago. Um, Brawl in Cell Block 99, starring Vince Vaughn. I saw this movie. I rented it about probably, and this came out in 2017. I rented it. Back 2017. I remember when this film came out, and I had heard about it a little bit. It wasn't really in the theater. It's kind of it's got a fairly big budget behind it, but it didn't have a wide theatrical release. But I remember I had heard about it. I've always really liked Vince Vaughn as an actor, but I'd heard about it, and then I remember seeing it on the at Opera House Video. I saw it on the shelves for like the new releases, and I so I got it and rented it, and I was like, wow, like this movie is just completely bonkers. and it's directed by S Craig Zahler. It's written and directed by S Craig Zahler. S Craig Zahler, he's a really wild card of a director. He directed Bone Tomahawk with Kurt Russell, and then he did a film fairly recently, Dragged on the Concrete, with Mel Gibson, and that came out maybe 2 years ago. It's a pretty new movie. And S. Craig Zahler, he is such a unique director. He's got such a unique vision and a way of being a storyteller. When I first saw, I've seen all of his films. Brawl and Cell Block 99 was the first movie of his that I had ever seen, and then I've seen the Kurt Russell movie, Bone Tomahawk. I saw that a couple of years ago, and then Dragged Under Concrete. I just saw that fairly recently, and his movies always have this sense of really intense, very intense and extreme, like brutal violence. There's always aspects of that in all of his films. But when I first got into his stuff, when I first saw this film, to me it had a little bit of a Tarantino kind of vibe. Even though he, when I've checked, when I after seeing this film and I went and I checked out his other films, I really I kind of switched gears as far as thinking that. But initially, I thought, wow, it has this kind of Tarantino vibe, just because it's there's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of his films have a lot of action in them and drama, but there's also a lot of time where the films are on the slower side, and basically there's a lot of dialogue of characters sitting around in a closed space talking about everyday things. So in that regard, it kind of brought me to a place of thinking. It kind of reminds me of like early Tarantino in a way, like the Reservoir Dogs, of where you have this relatively small cast and the whole film more or less takes place in this one setting, and it's very character based. You know, each person has a really interesting personality, and you're given enough information to where you care about each character. So in that regard, I kind of felt it had a Tarantino vibe, but and it was also his films are very gritty and kind of raw. But since I've seen all of his films and and I just bought this on Blu-ray last week. I went to, like I've said, some of the places that I usually go. The two places that I always go to buy movies is Bull Moose Music. I go there to buy the majority or all of my new Blu-rays. I go there to that's the place I go for that, and then I go to the other place I go to a lot is the Rockland Goodwill. That's where I buy a lot of the used Blu-rays, and I got this awesome film there, and I never seen it on Blu-ray, and it was super cheap, and I was super psyched that I bought it, and I got it last night. And since I've seen this movie, I watched it again last night, and I found myself enjoying it even more. And when I first saw this movie years back, I did see, I've seen all of his films since then, and my opinion of like his work has definitely changed. Um, his quality, the quality that I love about his work is he he basically writes uh, and directs everything. Everything is basically from his brain. Um, it's all it's all original content, and I love that. We kind of live in a time where a lot of films, a lot of filmmakers are adapting, something from a book or whatnot, and it's great. A lot of it can be a hit or miss kind of situation even in that regard. But that's it seems the last 20 years or so there's even more of the majority of films that are coming out where they're original, but they're not strictly original based. They're based on some other kind of previous work, or Well, with films, there's a lot of remakes of things or prequels or sequels, mostly in the action or horror genre. Um, but even say films that are more, like more melodrama based, there's a lot of films that are based off of some various, short story or a novel that's come out 15, 20 years ago. But the interesting thing, the awesome thing about S. Craig Zahler is that his work is all, from top to bottom, is all original, and it's all from his work. It's all from his brain. Another director that I really admire that does that is Christopher Nolan. Pretty much everything you see on screen is all from his imagination. And I think that's pretty unprecedented. It seems to be, in some ways, it seems to be kind of, to a degree, almost kind of a rare thing when a movie comes out and it's completely from the imagination of the filmmaker. Um, Most of the time it's based off of some other previous work. So, these guys doing this, S. Craig Zahler and Christopher Nolan, and I know there's a few others, but I think that's really commendable. And even if, say, the film isn't, say, something that hits the mark, it's still, I think, to a degree, earns some kind of respect because that's pretty cool that they can create this content. And I feel like S. Craig Zahler's work also, it has this real pulpy kind of vibe to it. It's in a lot of his films and the dialogue, the way it's structured, feels like you're reading a novel, like a crime novel. Very, very character centric. There's That's one of the things that I love about his films is every character that you see on the screen, even if they're not, say, in the film very long or they might not even have very much dialogue, there's something about them where they're they have this color to them where you automatically have empathy towards them, or you like them, or you care about them, and you want to see where their characters go. And very, and he has this very interesting narrative of where his characters will essentially talk about kind of everyday things that we all experience, but they have this slightly heightened thing behind them that gives it this quality of where you do feel like you're reading like a really good, well done novel. It's got this high level quality to it, and it's really rich. His characters and the storylines are pretty rich, and there's a lot of the thing too about his movies, especially with this film, with Vince Vaughn's character, is there's a lot of layers. He's very complex. He's got a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of things about him that you have empathy towards, or at least that I found like I care about. But then there's also aspects of his character where he's like really repulsive kind of character, and he's just complicated, and he's got all these different shades, and I think that's one of the greatest qualities of I think why his filmmaking is really great, because he has these characters, but they have all these different shades. They're not really one dimensional, and he takes chances. I feel like he definitely takes chances with his films. They definitely have, especially around this film. I mean, it's brutal. The violence is out of control. But the movie clocks in about 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's a fairly long movie, but there's all this, to a degree, lots of exposition, but there's a lot of build up, and it's kind of a slow movie the first hour, and you're just kind of getting this information about this guy who is, kind of going back to this life that he doesn't want to go back to, and then he's put into this impossible situation to try to, more or less save his wife and his newborn that's on its way, and he's trying to figure out how to save them and to try to save himself. And so when it comes to the area of where there is lots of violence, it's really jarring. It's really intense and very at times shocking. And he just has that style. S. Craig Zahler has that style, or S. Craig Zahler has that style with all of his films where, and I feel like he has influences of other genres. I feel like there's elements of Bone Tomahawk that almost have like a horror element. And with this film, Brawl and Brawl and Cell Block 99 has a real 70s kind of vibe to it. Um, so I think he's got, there's definitely a suspenseful element to it that is pretty engaging the whole time. Um, and also with the last film that he put out, Drag Across Concrete, is like a crime caper, and it stars Mel Gibson. The other thing that's awesome about this movie is it has Don Johnson is in it. He plays basically like a prison warden, and I'm a huge Don Johnson fan. He's always been one of my favorites, and he is so awesome in this movie. He's in like the last act of the film, and he basically plays this prison warden who's like just kind of a psychopath, and he basically runs the prison like a concentration camp or like a torture camp. And he definitely he takes on the role of like the villain, um, and he's fantastic. I really love Don Johnson. Growing up watching Miami Vice, and he's just been in so many great things since then. Knives Out, which is an amazing movie, came out a few years ago. He is so great in that. And then there was the Watchmen HBO series. He's also in that, and he's like probably one of the best characters in that whole show. Just amazing. And he has such a diverse skill level that every time I've seen him in a film, you almost don't recognize him. And this is so that when I watched this last night, I forgot that he was in it. So that was just like, oh yes, I'm totally into it. That was like, to me, that was the selling point. And it's great when his character is introduced, because it's about the movie's about 2.5 hours, and he's in like the last hour 45 minutes of the film, and seeing him come on the big screen was just great. It was just like, oh yes, this movie is like, it felt like once his character appears, it kind of takes it out of the, I feel like when Don Johnson's character is kind of introduced, it gives it this heightened reality thing where it's no longer based, say, so much in reality to a degree. It becomes a little bit of a heightened reality, meaning that it becomes something that if somebody is in maximum security prison, and then this kind of character is introduced, and then you start understanding what he's about, it takes it out of the kind of the ordinary, you know, situation that would probably happen in say in real life. So it kind of creates this like, heightened reality, almost a little bit of a comic book kind of vibe to it. Like he becomes this villain, and so it has that kind of essence to it. But amazing movie, super violent. The Blu-ray transfer is so killer. S. Craig Zahler is a force. I think he's one of the best directors around, and he's pretty well known. But then he's not very well known. But these films have all gotten really great. All of his films have gotten a lot of great, tremendous acclaim. So I look forward to seeing what else he'll be doing in the future. He's just a really, really skilled director and writer. And looking forward to buying his other movies on Blu-ray at some point. So check this out: 1987, Brawl and Cell Block 99, starring Vince Vaughn. Awesome movie. So this is Jason Dean. If you get a chance, please like and subscribe to my channel, and we will see you next time. Peace.